Well, you're looking good today, and it feels good to be with you today. I'm Kendall Bryan Hunter, author of this book, Consider My Servant Job, and this is Come Follow Me, Get to the Point, where I always show up, I always come prepared, we never take roll, and it's bring your own refreshments. How about freeze-dried bananas? Sorry, the company went out of business, legal persecution. They tried starting a business in California, so of course it didn't work out. So, we're at 125 subscribers, so thank you. I hope that you feel confident that you're at the beginning of something really incredible right now, at the ground floor. You can say that you were there first. New followers, DM 19134, Bill Brightman, Zion King. Hi, Trevan. Thank you for that comment. Well, a little bit off the point of come follow me, come follow me. It's there was a bishop in Mississippi who resigned, and it was posted up on Reddit. And I put a link to the video. I think it's just kind of interesting to see what's going on because this has an influence. You have the top-down stuff from church, general conference, handbook, the scriptures. Then you have bottom-up stuff, people doing stuff, and sometimes people get attracted to the wrong thing as they start looking down at their feet instead of up to where. Upstairs, and you get ideas. But if you choose to watch this video, think celestial and think about the things that you're studying in the Book of Mormon and what type of impact that would have on that decision or how you feel about it, or it shapes your views about what's going on with that, a bishop resigning. Another thing, too, is keeping a notebook of notes. What you can do is write your questions, get a copy of the CES letter, and read it through, and then as you read the Book of Mormon, what does the Book of Mormon have to say about the points brought up by the CES letter? Does it have to say anything or nothing? Or you think about, also you can use, my phone's kind of over there right now, but this is the old school paper thing, but they have plenty of notebook apps. There's a notebook on your Gospel Library app, plus the Gospel Living app also has a section for notes. So there's no excuse for you not being able to take notes, and doing a little dusting here. So here we are at the beginning of the Book of Mormon, the text proper. So I'm not going to begin with 1 Nephi 1:1. I'm actually going to begin with the 116 pages. So as we know, Joseph Smith translated the 116 pages, and in the Joseph Smith manual, let's see if I can reach it. It's buried underneath there. There's a Joseph Smith manual. They have I think it's chapter 4, talks about the Book of Mormon, and they have the original preface page. This isn't the title page with the preface from the original Book of Mormon, where he talks about losing the 116 pages, or he refers to it as the Book of Lehi. So what that means is, how the Book of Mormon was originally intended. You'd open up the Book of Mormon, you read the title page, then you go to the Book of Lehi, and after that you go to the Book of Mosiah, and this kind of cycle through how we have it now in our current edition. We're all familiar with the story about the 116 pages lost. We don't know what was on it precisely. I have a link to on the church. It has a history topics, and that's one of the topics about what exactly was on there. There's been some scholarship. Don Bradley recently wrote a book about what was on the lost pages, and apparently Joseph Smith did transmit some information onto some of the early brethren. Erastus Snow, he's most famous for mentioning that Ishmael was from the tribe of Ephraim, whereas Lehi was from the tribe of Manasseh. And that's kind of an important thing to know, but here and there's ideas about it. How much text is missing? I don't know. It's 116 pages plus the first 2 chapters of the Book of Mosiah. And I know that second part is true because you can go to the Joseph Smith papers and read the printer's manuscript. And now the printer's manuscript, it's funny. You have to look at this. If it says Mosiah, it starts out Mosiah, then Roman numeral chapter 3, it's crossed out and it says Roman numeral 1. And so there's actually 2 chapters missing, but if you know in the earlier edition of the Book of Mormon, the chapters were a little bit longer, so it may actually be 4 chapters of material missing from the Book of Mosiah. And was it 28 chapters from the Book of Lehi that were missing? And well, if you're mad about it, have you chosen to forgive Joseph Smith and Martin Harris for doing it instead of just getting mad? And I don't know. We don't have any word about it being restored, but if we're going to get the sealed portion, we might get the first portion of the Book of Mormon again. So that's that. It's in there, and it affects the text that you're reading. And I'm still not going to go into 1 Nephi 1:1 yet. I'm going to talk about this mysterious block of text I talked a little bit about last time. It says 1 Nephi, the book of his reign and ministry, and then this block of text here. This is what's called a colophon, or it's an introductory statement, and it's common to ancient writings. I guess as a scroll, the scribes at the beginning or the end of the text would do a summary, said, okay, this book's about the X, Y, and Z, just so as you're scrolling along in the scroll, that you're able to know what book you're in, because it probably didn't do running headers like our books have now, or indices. I think the colophons, first of all, this colophon was written by Nephi, because at the end of it says, or in other words, I, Nephi, wrote this. And I think it's interesting because Joseph Smith produces this text, and for me, it looks like there's colophons in there. In the modern text, like I talked in the last video, the ancient colophons are written in Roman type, and then the study helps that are in there are done in italic. Now, E.B. Grandin put all those in italic, and that was his editorial call. But finally, in the 2013, we did that just to show, okay, what's in Roman is ancient, what's in italics is new, like the chapter headings. Those are new things, not part of the ancient text. So when you're studying it, not to get confused. But I just think it's interesting is, for me, it looks like they're in there. No one talked about that. It wasn't until the 1950s with Hugh Nibley where someone who's a Latter-day Saint scholar started saying, hey, wait a minute, look, there's colophons in the Book of Mormon. And I just can't unsee it. It's there, and it looks like they're in there, and they're Joseph Smith didn't talk about them. I've read every single Joseph Smith paper. Brigham Young, I've read every talk in Journal of Discourses. No one talked until the 1950s. That's one of those sneaky things in the Book of Mormon. Kind of like some of the names like Abish, or another name like Payanki, Hermount. So it's kind of funny things in the Book of Mormon that just kind of creep up that no one in the first generation knew about, and it took a couple of generations for people to notice it. So that's it. So the 116 pages, the colophon, and let's get into chapter 1. So it's Nephi writing, and he's doing an abridgment of his father's record, the book of Lehi, so it's crossover material. But let's start with Lehi's story. Jerusalem's wicked, there's prophets going around, and Lehi prays over it, and he gets what I call his first vision. You see a pillar of fire, just like in Exodus, or the first vision, this pillar of fire motif, and it's on a rock. And he has this overpowering vision, and he comes home, and he's just overwhelmed. So he just collapses on his bed, just like Joseph Smith did, just enervated. He gets a second vision. He sees one like the sun, and the 12 as the stars. Are these apostles, or are these the 12 tribes of Israel? Well, both. And then he's given a book to read. That's common in Isaiah chapter 29, Jeremiah 25, Ezekiel chapter 2, Zechariah chapter 5, and Revelation chapter 10, which we just read. That prophets, you have the scriptures, but prophets are given additional information that's not contained in the scriptures, and that rounds out what their teaching is. And so that's why Abinadi can read Isaiah chapter 53 one way that some people can't read it, because they have the additional information, the esoteric information. Like I said, this is a common motif among prophets. And so he reads the stuff that's in there, and he learns about Christ and other things. He gets full of the Spirit, but he's full of woe. So he gets a second wind, kind of like Abinadi. Abinadi preached. 2 years later, he goes back there in disguise, preaches again, and we'll talk a little bit about the disguise when we get to that. Or also in Helaman 10, where you have Nephi, son of Nephi, is preaching, and then he says, okay, I'm kind of fed up, goes back home, the Lord calls him, so he turns around and goes back there, Alman in the city of Abinadi. That's a common motif with prophets. Prophets say, okay, I think I'm done, but God says, no, go back there, give them a second chance. They need a second witness. So Lehi goes out there, preaches again. Hey, and they reject the prophets. Chapter 2, you get Lehi's third vision, and he gets the dream to leave. And this is where a motif I call the crowd reaction. Pay attention when your prophet speaks, how people react to him. You have Laman, and you have Lemuel, and Lehi has to tell him, okay, be like this fountain, and Lemuel be like this valley. And as it said, Nephi comments, they knew not the dealings of the Lord. That's why they're so obstinate. Now, this is interesting. They certainly have the information there. They're in the same familial environment. Their father was a prophet, he had visions, was clearly a dreamer, like you'd expect someone from the tribe of Joseph. But they just didn't internalize it. And that's an important message where you have children. Some people just take to it, some people don't. And you have also with generations, like Alma the Younger's generation, they just didn't stick to it. And we're seeing this right now with, for some reason, the teaching isn't sticking with a generation for some reason. The unbelief comes, the hard-heartedness comes first, and then you have the unbelief follows second. It's an attitude. Are you hard or are you soft? Are you receptive? So, Lehi has to preach to his older sons, two older sons. He preached and their frames did shake. And that reminds us of 1 Nephi 17 with the building of the boat, where Nephi has to shock his brothers into obedience. Lehi confounds him. Sometimes that's what it takes to get people going, and it just doesn't work. And then Nephi's reaction. Nephi desired to know, and he was blessed with this independent revelation, just like his father. Nephi was as much as a prophet as his father was, and susceptible and craving and hungry for revelation. Now, Sam and Lemuel seem kind of like satellites, shadowy figures. I'm just wondering about Sam. The reason why Sam was the way he was is that as Nephi's older brother, he took the brunt of the abuse of both Laman and Lemuel. Imagine if you're a little kid and your two older brothers are just abusive and very satanic. What does that do to your personality, growing up being abused? And are you a little bit harsh with Sam? Why you seem so bland? Or is this someone who got abused? And so you had a certain psychology, the psychology of a victim of abuse. Chapter 3 and 4, let's do these as a unit. So we have the fourth vision, and the need to get scriptures from Laban. And we're familiar, I'll go and do. Now think about the attempts. First they go to Laban, sorry, they're similar names, Laban, and they ask and hit the road. And Nephi says, okay, let's bribe him. Let's buy the plates off of him. And of course, the same thing, and Laban kept the money. This reminds us of what Thomas S. Monson said. He said, in this life, where we have opportunities to strive and to achieve, I bear witness that on occasion we need to make a second effort, and a third effort, and a fourth effort, as many degrees of effort as may be required to accomplish what we strive to achieve. Being persistent, like the movie Gravity with Sandra Bullock. Good film about being persistent, Nephi being persistent. And they got their backs pressed up to the wall. And Nephi just started acting. That's what you do when you get your back pressed up to the wall. You start taking action, not knowing beforehand what you should do. Nephi acted. He was blessed. And Laban wasn't blessed. So the beheading, and this is a trouble spot for a lot of people, and they kind of discuss this in general conference. Sometimes people are looking for a rule or sort of a test. Okay, if conditions X, Y, Z are met, then it's okay to behead Laban. And that's not how it's working. It's just that God inspired Nephi, and as you read it, it's an incremental process. Nephi sees Laban, picks up the sword. He's like looking at the sword. Oh, for crying out loud. I apologize for that. So as I was saying, Nephi goes up there and he sees Laban. He's in the street and he takes a sword out. And he starts looking at Laban's sword. And then the spirit says, kill him. And Nephi does what we all do. He says, wait a second. We're supposed to love our neighbor. We're not supposed to kill our neighbor. We're supposed to love our neighbor. And then the spirit constrains him again. He gets this little debate and he starts reasoning it out. Said, yeah, you need to have the plates. We can't accomplish our mission of colonization without the scriptures. So Nephi takes it. Now, I'm kind of curious about the position because once you behead someone, there's just a lot of blood. And so you had to put his head downhill so the blood wouldn't stain the clothes because Nephi would have to change into the clothes. So you put the head down and someone who slaughtered animals and the sword comes down and the rest is history. He disguises himself and goes to Zoram and question, so did Nephi kidnap Zoram? Read it very carefully. Nephi makes a covenant and Zoram agrees to go on with him. Yeah, there is some coercion. Zoram didn't wake up this morning and do that, but he could have bolted any time. He could have left the party, stolen a camel and headed back to Jerusalem any time, and he went along with it. I mean, yeah, it's not clean and pristine as we'd like, but yeah, he went willingly, and it's interesting to see what happened to Zoram's descendants. So that's 3 and 4. 5. We go back to camp, and Sariah is catastrophizing, and it's understandable. She's worried about her children, but she's also bringing a lot of negative energy. So think about Job's wife. Curse God and die, negative energy. And that's something for the sisters to think about. You feel a certain way, but are you just creating a lot of negativity? So they come back, they perform sacrifices, and then Lehi begins to study the plates, and he gets revelation. That's an important thing to learn. The power of revelation from studying scriptures. So there's a little technical difficulty. So, the Christ quotient at the end. First of all, how does Christ guide us by dreams? Now, are we paying attention to our dreams? Do we have a notebook or phone handy by our bed to record the promptings and impressions we get, or we just kind of stream of thought? Secondly is the extra biblical revelation, the esoteric revelation that prophets get. Are we paying attention to it? That they're getting some stuff when they tell us to do something, they're telling us for a reason, such as using the correct name of the church. And the crowd reaction, what I talked about, Laman and Lemuel's reaction to Christ's revelation. And they didn't murmur because they knew not the dealings of the God who created them. In fact, Neal A. Maxwell, member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, in October 1999 gave a talk called Lessons from Laman and Lemuel. It deserves a read. So both Lehi and Nephi, when they're dealing with Laman and Lemuel, they have to shake them, shock them. So questions, can you just talk things out with people? Did just talking things through work? Did that work in the War in Heaven? Did that work with Laman and Lemuel? Just sitting down, okay, let's just work through our differences. I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't try, but does that work all the time? What do you read about in the Book of Mormon? Another thing to think about is, why are Laman and Lemuel, Sam and Nephi, so different? It's the same family, the same gene pool, the same environment. But what are you learning about raising your kids? It's interesting, during the Passover, they talk about children with the 4 different temperaments, and it's like Laman, Lemuel, Samuel, and Nephi. Your children have different temperaments, and what works for one doesn't work for the other. And you're just hurting them by not respecting people's different temperaments. Laban's head. How much do the brass plates weigh? Well, they weigh as much as Laban's head. What does this tell you about the importance of the scriptures? If we're taking the Book of Mormon lightly, what are we going to say to Laban in the afterlife? We stand before him and it's like, okay, here, I lost my head and died so you can get these. And I'm not saying that Laban was a good person. We don't have enough information about him. Another thing, too, to think about taking life. As we have it in the King James Version, it says, thou shalt not kill. And if you know anything about it, that's not quite a good translation. It says, ratzach is the word there, and it could be translated as thou shalt not murder. It's a little bit of ambiguous. There is a slight difference between killing and murdering someone, lying in wait. And pacifism, like the people of Ammon, or like Gandhi, or Martin Luther King, or some other pacifist, the people of Ammon. Think about that, because that comes up during the war passages with the just war theory. That's discussed in Alma 43, 46 through 47, Doctrine and Covenants 98, 23 through 48, reaffirmed in our dispensation. Joseph Smith taught, there's one principle which is eternal. It is the duty of all men to protect the lives and their lives and the lives of the household whenever necessary requires, and no power has a right to forbid it should the last extreme arrive. Joseph Smith also said, 29th of January, 1843, any man who will not fight for his wife and his children is a coward and a bastard. Okay, so during the war in heaven, why weren't we all pacifists? During the war in heaven, why weren't we all pacifists if pacifism is what Christ wants? If you're a pacifist, what do you think about Joan of Arc and Dietrich Bonhoeffer? You're getting some ideas that people have certain ideas, you're respectful of them, but pay attention to what you're being taught in the Book of Mormon. So how does Christ guide prophets? What do we learn about in these 5 chapters about guiding prophets? How should we respond to the prophets when they guide us? Like using the correct name of the church, letting go of Boy Scouts, having high priests and elders meet together. There's been mixed results with that. We've lost some high priests over it. Really good people that just rub them the wrong way. I'm a high priest myself, so it's not like I'm being... I mean, that takes the ad hominem argument off the table, but or we just ignoring some elders who should be ordained high priest. That's another thing to think about. So, the Book of Mormon, story about following prophets, and more importantly about following Christ. And following Christ, that's the point. And I apologize for completely forgetting about my sword. Thank you.